All right, Commanders fans, sit down for this one, because Washington just did something that's got the entire fan base talking, and honestly, it's the kind of move that tells you a lot more than it seems to on the surface. The Commanders have agreed to terms with veteran cornerback Rasul Douglas on a one-year deal worth up to $3.8 million. And while that might not sound like a headline that shakes the league to its core, stick with me here, because underneath this signing is a story about a secondary that got torched last season, a front office that knows it, and a team that is quietly, methodically trying to patch a hole before it becomes a full-blown crisis. This is the Commanders' Focus breakdown you didn't know you needed, so let's get into it. Let's start with the man himself. Rasul Douglas is not a household name outside of hardcore football circles, but if you've been paying attention to the NFL for the better part of a decade, you know exactly who this guy is. He's a 30-year-old corner turning 31 this August, entering his 10th season in the league, and he has bounced around more rosters than a fantasy football waiver wire during a bye week. Eagles, Panthers, Packers, Bills, Dolphins. Along the way, he's also had cups of coffee with the Raiders, the Texans, and the Cardinals, which, if you're keeping score at home, means this man has basically toured the entire NFL map. He was a third-round pick out of the 2017 draft, originally selected by Philadelphia, and since then, his career has been one of those wild, unpredictable rides that only football can produce. Cut here, claimed there, traded for draft picks, signed off the street, and somehow, through all of it, still finding a way to be a full-time starter for most of the last several years. And that's really the headline underneath the headline. This is not a camp body. This is not organizational depth being brought in to fill out a roster for training camp reps. $3.8 million for a cornerback on a one-year prove-it deal is real money, and it tells you the Commanders see something in this guy that they think can actually help them win football games in 2026. So what exactly did Washington just buy? Let's break down the numbers, because they matter here. Last season, playing for the Miami Dolphins, Douglas appeared in 15 games and started 13 of them. He picked off 2 passes, broke up 13 more, forced a fumble, and even got home for a sack. Some reports even have him earning an AFC Defensive Player of the Week nod back in Week 14, which is not nothing for a guy who was fighting his way up a depth chart at the start of the year. Here's the wild part of that story, though. Douglas didn't even start the season as Miami's guy. He was behind Jack Jones and Storm Duck on the depth chart when the year kicked off. But when Duck went down with an injury in Week 1, the door opened, and Douglas walked right through it. He fought through some foot and ankle issues of his own along the way, missed a couple of games, but came back in Week 13 and immediately started making splash plays, picking off passes in back-to-back weeks. That's the kind of resilient story that front offices love. And it's exactly the kind of veteran presence Washington's coaching staff has been searching for. Now let's talk about what he's not, because we have to be honest here on Commanders Focus. This isn't a savior signing. Douglas is what scouts call a zone-centric cornerback. That means he's at his best playing off coverage, reading the quarterback's eyes, breaking on the football, using his length and experience rather than pure top-end speed to make plays. And here's the thing. He was never the fastest guy on the field, even in his 20s. So as he inches toward his mid-30s, if his athleticism takes even a small step back, that's going to show up on tape in a hurry against some of these blazing fast NFC East and NFC wide receiver rooms he's about to face twice a year. Quarterbacks actually targeted him 82 times last season, and he gave up 54 catches for 515 yards and 3 touchdowns. Those are not lockdown corner numbers. Nobody is going to tell you Rasul Douglas is walking into Washington to shut down the league's best receivers on an island every single Sunday. But here's why that almost doesn't matter for what this signing is actually about. Think about where the Commanders' defense stood at the end of last season. Washington's pass defense ranked 28th in the entire NFL, giving up over 240 passing yards a game. 28th. out of 32 teams. That is not a typo, and that is not a small problem you fix with a couple of camp battles and good vibes. That is a foundational issue in the secondary that has haunted this franchise for years, and everybody who watched this team last season knows exactly why. The cornerback room was, in a word, a liability. And the most glaring example of that whole situation was the Marshawn Lattimore experiment, which, let's just say it politely, did not go according to plan. Lattimore was brought in with real expectations and real money, and by March, Washington had already moved on and released him. That is about as clear a signal as a front office can send that things did not work out the way anyone hoped. So when you connect those dots, a secondary that finished near the bottom of the league, a big-name corner acquisition that flamed out and got cut loose, and a team that knows it's got real questions heading into a pivotal season, suddenly the Rasul Douglas signing makes a whole lot of sense. This isn't about replacing a superstar. This is about insurance. This is about experience. This is about making sure that if things go sideways again, Washington isn't left scrambling with nothing behind their starters. And that brings us to the real juicy part of this story. What does this signing actually mean for the cornerback depth chart heading into training camp? Right now, the Commanders' plan, at least on paper, looks like this. Trey Amos is expected to be the #1 outside corner, assuming he's healthy. And that assuming he's healthy part is doing some heavy lifting in that sentence, because Amos is currently working his way back from a pretty serious injury. Reports out of the building suggest he's trending toward being ready for Week 1, but nothing is guaranteed in the NFL, especially with injuries like the one he's dealing with. Mike Sainristil, an early draft investment for this franchise, is expected to hold down the other outside spot, with the hope that he takes that next leap forward in year 3 and finally locks in as a legitimate starting corner in this league. And then in the slot, all signs point to Amik Robertson handling that role, giving the Commanders a nickel presence with some feistiness and experience to it. So where does Rasul Douglas fit into all of that? He's not walking in and taking a starting job on day 1 at least. That's not the expectation right now. What he provides is something this roster has desperately lacked in recent years: legitimate, credible depth. If Trey Amos needs a few extra weeks to get back to full health, the Commanders don't have to rush him back before he's ready, because now there's a real NFL starter-caliber player who can step in and hold the fort. If Mike Sainristil hits a rough patch, and let's be real, every young corner does at some point, the coaching staff isn't forced into the old trap of just running him out there over and over again, hoping he figures it out on the fly while opposing offenses pick him apart. Instead, they have a proven veteran who started 93 games over a 9-year career that they can lean on. That is a massive shift in philosophy for a franchise that has, quite frankly, been burned by thin cornerback depth for years. And it's not just Douglas walking into an empty room either. Washington has also brought in Ahkello Witherspoon as part of this offseason retool of the secondary, and names like Antonio Hamilton and Darius Rush are still very much in the mix, with Rush reportedly having a strong offseason program that's turned some heads internally. Add in the safety tandem of Quan Martin and Percy Butler. Sorry, let's stick with the reporting here. Quan Martin and the group rotating with Will Harris seeing time as well, and you're starting to see a defensive backfield that has gone from concerning to at least intriguing heading into camp. Is it a finished product? Absolutely not. But it's a room with actual competition now, actual veteran leadership, and actual answers if the starters go down. That's the story here, folks. That's what $3.8 million buys you in today's NFL. Now here's a fun little wrinkle to this whole saga, and it's honestly one of those NFL storylines that makes you appreciate just how small this league really is. Douglas's path to Washington wasn't exactly a straight line. He spent a chunk of last offseason sitting on the open market, unsigned, waiting for a call, coming off his first full season as a starter with the Buffalo Bills. It wasn't until Miami's cornerback room got absolutely wrecked by injuries that the Dolphins came calling and gave him a 1-year prove-it deal. Sound familiar? Because that's basically the exact same script playing out again right now with Washington. Prove-it deal, injury-driven need at the position, veterans stepping into a defense with something to prove. If the pattern holds, Douglas has a real shot to outperform expectations again, just like he did in Miami, where he turned a backup role into a full-time starting job by mid-season. And let's give credit where it's due here. Douglas has had some real high points in his career that get overlooked because of how much he's bounced around the league. During his stretch with Green Bay and into that early run in Buffalo, he was racking up serious pass breakup numbers, 14 in one season, 13 in another, with 5 interceptions in one year and 4 in another. Those are the numbers of a guy who, at his peak, was a legitimate difference maker on the back end of a defense. Yes, the last couple of years have shown some natural decline that comes with age and mileage in this league, but this is not some washed-up journeyman being brought in out of desperation. This is a guy who, as recently as this past season, was good enough to earn a Defensive Player of the Week honor and help stabilize a Miami secondary that needed him badly. So when you step back and look at the big picture, here's the real story behind this Rasul Douglas signing. It's not flashy. It's not going to dominate national NFL headlines for more than a day or two. But for Commanders fans who have watched this secondary get torched year after year, who have watched this team give up big plays in critical moments, who have watched promising young corners get thrown into the fire without a safety net, this signing represents something important. A front office that is finally actively trying to build real depth and real competition at a position that has been an Achilles heel for this franchise. It's a shrewd, low-cost, low-risk move with real upside if things break right, and honestly, in today's NFL. Those are exactly the kinds of signings that end up making a difference in close games in November and December when the starters are banged up and the season is on the line. Will Rasul Douglas be a starter for the Washington Commanders in Week 1? Right now, all signs point to him being that steady veteran option coming off the bench, the guy who can step in seamlessly if needed, rather than a guaranteed starter from day one. But if history has taught us anything about this man's career, it's that you should never count him out. He has a track record of walking into new situations, initially as the backup plan, and forcing his way into a starting role through sheer competence and reliability. If Mike Sainristil struggles, if Trey Amos needs more time to heal, don't be shocked if Rasul Douglas ends up playing a far bigger role for this defense than anyone is currently projecting. That is exactly the kind of storyline that makes training camp must-watch television for us Commanders fans, and it's exactly the kind of storyline we are going to be tracking closely for you right here. This move also tells us something bigger about where this coaching staff's head is at heading into a genuinely important season for this franchise. After a magical playoff run that captured the hearts of this entire fan base, expectations in Washington have shot through the roof. Nobody wants to hear about moral victories anymore. This locker room, this coaching staff, and this front office know that in order to take the next step, they cannot afford to have the same defensive breakdowns that plagued them at times last season. Bringing in a proven veteran presence like Rasul Douglas, even on a modest one-year deal, is a clear signal that ownership and the front office are serious about fixing the problems that held this team back rather than just hoping things magically improve on their own. That is the kind of accountability and self-awareness that fans have been begging to see from this organization for years. And credit where it's due, it looks like it's finally happening. So here's where we land on the Rasul Douglas signing. It might not be the sexiest move of the offseason. It's not going to get the same headlines as a big trade or a marquee free agent splash. But when you dig into the numbers, the context, and the timing, this is exactly the kind of savvy, under-the-radar move that smart organizations make. It adds a proven veteran to a cornerback room that desperately needed one. It provides insurance for a defense that cannot afford another season near the bottom of the league rankings. And it sets up a genuinely fascinating training camp battle that we are going to be watching every single step of the way for you. That's the breakdown on Rasul Douglas and what his signing means for the Washington Commanders heading into training camp and the 2026 season. If you found this breakdown helpful, do me a favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more Commanders fans just like you. Drop a comment down below and let me know your honest reaction. Do you think Rasul Douglas ends up starting for this team by mid-season, or do you think he settles into that veteran depth role we talked about? I want to hear your take. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we are going to be all over Commanders training camp with breaking news, roster battles, and everything else you need to know heading into this season. Thanks for watching Commanders Focus, and we will see you in the next one.
I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.